Congress is here to pass laws. That's what a legislature is. Legislature, legal, it's the same word from the word lex, which is Latin for law. Ask Mr. Williams, I think he'll agree. And so Congress is ultimately there to pass laws. There ought to be a law. The law needs to change. The Congress is supposed to take all matters that the Constitution gives to the federal government and to make laws about it. The reason we want Congress to make the laws and not the president or the courts is that Congress is closer to the people because of the way they are elected than anyone else. They have small districts or at most states to represent. So in theory, they're more in harmony with the popular will. And if the popular will says that slavery should be limited or abolished, then slavery will move towards limiting it or abolishing it or towards a civil war. And if the popular will at one point says that homosexuality should be against the law, it'll be against the law. And then 2 generations later, when the public will says homosexuals should be able to marry like anyone else, then, well, we have marriage like anyone else for people who are not conventional in their sexuality. The Congress is there to make and change laws because it is closest to the popular will because of the small size of their districts and the frequency with which they have to go back and face election. Congress is also there to decide how taxes are going to be raised or lowered, what they're going to be spent on. The source of all laws comes from Congress. And the source of all budgets also come from Congress. The government cannot raise a dime of tax revenue without the Congress authorizing it. The government cannot raise or lower the tax rate or the type of taxes collected without the Congress starting it. So the Congress is the source of all law rooted in the Constitution. And the Congress is the source of all federal money, which must be raised according to constitutional means. And if the Congress raises too much money for taxation, to spend on programs people don't believe in, the Congress will change. Its representatives will be replaced by people who more fully reflect the popular will, and all of a sudden, the Congress will be backtracking, eliminating old laws, getting new ones up there. Now, why do we have a separate executive? Because you don't want ever somebody to be a judge, jury, and executioner. And you certainly don't want that person to be the police officer who's responsible for catching criminals and protecting people. Because what will happen is and I come from a family of police and teachers. I love good policemen, and I am very grateful to good police forces, American police forces who root their conduct in the Constitution. But anyone who works with the scum of the earth criminals is going to have moments where they lose their perspective and where they become emotional. And you do not want somebody who has just seen an entire family of people victimized by a violent criminal then be empowered not only to catch that criminal and bring them to justice, but then to judge them, sentence them, and carry out the sentence. You want to separate it, and you want the decision making about what is justice in this case to be made by people other than the enforcement officers of the law. The Congress makes the laws. The president enforces the laws. The president is too closely involved with making policy to necessarily understand what the spirit of the law is if it runs contrary to his ideas, and the president is also too involved to necessarily appreciate the constitutionality of it. The president will have opinions, the Congress will have opinions, but that, I've been leading up to why we have courts. Courts are there to check the Congress and make sure that it doesn't do stupid, unconstitutional things. Because, in the name of serving the people, maybe they'll want to do stupid, unconstitutional things. For example, right now, huge numbers of Americans are not at work. Their families are not getting the income that they need to survive. This is a scary moment for a lot of people. And anyone who doesn't think that the economy has nothing to do with saving lives doesn't understand where suicide comes from. Doesn't understand how people can end up in families that fall apart and descend into violence and chaos. The economy allows everyday people to do productive work that they can be proud of and that can provide for them and their families what they need and a little of what they want. If there was a panic and the people's representatives made a bunch of laws designed to deal with this problem in an unconstitutional way, like giving a universal basic income to every American, or raising taxes to pay for that universal basic income, or to decide that everyone's going to get their old paycheck from February before this all started to go crazy, and that we just invent the money by printing it. All of those things might be popular in certain circles if we were to panic as a people, but they wouldn't necessarily be wise, and they wouldn't necessarily be constitutional. The courts are there to be a fail-safe, a circuit breaker, something to prevent a well-intentioned but deeply misguided Congress or a well-intentioned but deeply involved president from doing wrong. The basis of our freedom is the Constitution, and the courts are there to keep an eye and make sure that the president and that the Congress do not do unconstitutional things because they seem expedient or popular. So, we've talked a little bit in general about the roles of Congress. Now let's look next at each house of Congress.